I was always the type of person who prided myself on being level-headed. I didn't believe in ghosts or anything that couldn't be explained by science. But that was before I moved into the apartment at 2077 Birchwood Avenue, the one that seemed perfect at first. Quiet, affordable, and just the right size for someone like me. Little did I know, it was about to become my worst nightmare. It started slowly, almost imperceptibly. The first night, I had trouble sleeping. It wasn't anything too unusual, just the occasional shifting of my body and the normal discomfort of a new bed. I didn't think much of it, chalking it up to the stress of moving into a new place. But on the second night, it happened. I woke up to a strange pressure on the bed. It wasn't like the weight of blankets or even a shift in the mattress. It was different, more deliberate, as if someone was slowly getting into bed with me. At first, I thought it was just a dream. But then I felt it, the sensation of cold fingers pressing down on the mattress beside me. My breath hitched. I froze. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond. Sleep paralysis. I had read about it, of course, but never experienced it. Panic rose in my chest as I realized I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't do anything. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat growing louder in my ears. The pressure beside me grew heavier. I could feel the bed sink as though someone or something was settling in next to me. It felt wrong. The air around me turned cold, and I could almost smell something foul, like decay. A shiver ran down my spine, and I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to escape the feeling. Then I heard it. A whisper so soft, so close that it sent chills coursing through my veins. Sleep forever. The voice was low, raspy, and chilling. It made my skin crawl. I wanted to scream, to fight, but my body remained paralyzed, frozen in place as the whispers continued. You can't escape. You will never wake up. The words twisted and churned in my mind, and suddenly I saw it, just at the edge of my vision, a tall, skeletal figure, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark. The thing was hovering near me, its cold fingers lightly tracing my arm, sending waves of icy dread through my body. I wanted to scream, to move, to run, but I couldn't. The more I tried to fight, the harder it became to breathe. I could feel its presence press down on me, like a weight that was suffocating me. The entity's presence seemed to fill the room, wrapping around me, pulling me deeper into the darkness. Don't fight it, the voice whispered again, this time in my ear, sending a wave of terror through me. It was so close, I could almost feel its breath. Come with me. Let me take you somewhere deeper. I struggled, my mind racing, but it was no use. The thing was stronger than me, and it was pulling me, drawing me into its cold embrace. I could feel myself slipping, my consciousness fading as the darkness closed in. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. I woke up with a jolt, gasping for air, drenched in sweat, my heart still pounding in my chest. I was alone, the bed was empty, but the fear lingered, gnawing at me. An insidious presence that I couldn't shake. That night was only the beginning. The pressure, the whispers, the figure with glowing eyes. Each night, they came back, stronger, more persistent. I would lie there, paralyzed, unable to move, as the entity climbed into bed with me, cold fingers brushing my skin, its whispers curling in my mind like smoke. Desperation began to set in. I couldn't sleep, couldn't rest. Every night was the same. Lying in my bed, trapped in the grip of fear, unable to escape. The figure, the whispers, the feeling of suffocating darkness. It was all too much. I knew something was wrong. But what? What was this thing, and why was it haunting me? I started researching the apartment. I found an old news article buried deep in an archive about the previous tenant, a man named Thomas Weber. According to the report, Thomas had died in his sleep. His body discovered only days later, lying cold in the very bed where I now slept. The article didn't go into much detail, but something about it sent a cold chill down my spine. What if this entity wasn't just a figment of my imagination? What if it was Thomas Weber's restless spirit, still roaming the halls, searching for a new host, someone to take over where he had left off? The more I researched, the more I found similar stories. People who had lived in this apartment before me spoke of strange occurrences, pressure on the bed, whispers in the dark, an overwhelming sense of dread. Each person had left the apartment, claiming it was haunted, but none had stuck around long enough to investigate further. It was clear now. This wasn't just sleep paralysis. This was something darker, something that had been waiting, watching, and now had found me. The entity, the spirit of Thomas Weber, was trying to take me, to draw me into its eternal darkness, just as it had done to countless others. I couldn't stay, but I also couldn't leave. Every time I tried to move out, the whispers grew louder, more urgent, until I could no longer bear it. It was as if the entity was tethered to me, following me, waiting for me to make a move. The walls felt like they were closing in, and I realized too late that there was no escaping the curse of this place. One night, as I lay in bed, the figure appeared again, tall, skeletal, its eyes glowing in the dark. But this time, it didn't whisper. It didn't speak. It just stood there, watching me, its presence suffocating, the weight of it crushing me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. All I could do was stare back, my heart pounding in my chest, my body frozen in terror. And then, slowly, I felt it. Its cold, bony fingers pressing down on me, pulling me toward it, dragging me into the darkness. That was the last thing I remember before everything went black. I woke up in the hospital a week later. The doctors couldn't explain what had happened to me, but they said I had suffered from a severe panic attack, a complete mental breakdown. They told me I had been found on the floor, muttering incoherently about the thing in the bed. I never returned to the apartment. The landlord was quick to evict me after I left, claiming I had left without paying rent, but I knew the truth. That apartment, 2077 Birchwood Avenue, was cursed. The spirit of Thomas Weber still roamed the halls, waiting for its next victim. As for me, I haven't slept the same since. Every night, I feel the pressure on my bed. The whispers haunt me in the dark, and the figure, always the same, always watching, lurks in the corners of my mind, waiting to drag me back into the depths of its cold, suffocating grip. I know it's only a matter of time before it comes for me again. I had always loved the quiet of the night. There was something about the silence that made everything feel sharper, more alive. As a late-night radio host, I was no stranger to the eerie thrill of the darkness. My show, Whispers in the Night, was dedicated to the supernatural. I read spooky stories, discussed ghost sightings, and talked about every creepy thing you could imagine. Over the years, I'd grown accustomed to strange calls, people claiming they'd seen ghosts or had paranormal experiences. Most of them were just attention seekers, but every now and then, there was something that left a chill in my spine. It was one of those nights that things started to change. The phone lines were quiet when the show began. I'd just read a particularly chilling tale about a haunted house and was prepping for the next segment when the phone rang. It was odd, considering the hour, but I picked it up. "Whispers in the Night," I said, my voice smooth and inviting. "Who's on the line?" There was a long pause on the other end, the kind of silence that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and then the voice came, a raspy, distorted voice that sent a cold shiver down my spine. "You're going to meet a terrible fate," the voice hissed. "Soon, you will know what it feels like to be hunted." Before I could say anything, the line went dead. I stared at the receiver in my hand, my heart thumping a little faster than usual. Was it a prank? It wasn't the first time I'd heard something unsettling on the other end of the line, but there was something about this one that felt different. I shrugged it off as the weirdness of the night and continued with my show, talking about haunted locations and playing eerie background music. But the moment the segment ended, the phone rang again. It was the same voice. "You're still here," it rasped, "but soon you won't be." This time I tried to speak back. "Who is this? What do you want?" but the voice didn't answer. Instead, the call abruptly ended, the line going silent. My studio was small, but it was always well maintained, and I knew my equipment better than anyone. Still, the hairs on the back of my neck refused to relax. Over the next few nights, the calls kept coming, always the same, always distorted. The voice became more insistent, more unsettling. It would tell me that something was coming for me, that I couldn't escape it. At first, I thought it was just someone having fun at my expense. But the voice never gave up, never stopped calling. And with each call, the energy in the station seemed to grow heavier, like a weight pressing down on my shoulders. Then came the night when things took a darker turn. I was live on air, discussing a chilling tale of a haunted mansion, when the lights in the studio flickered. The overhead bulbs buzzed like they were struggling to stay on. I frowned, glancing up at the flickering lights. A moment later, the sound equipment began to glitch, static crackling over the speakers, the microphones emitting high-pitched shrieks. I quickly adjusted the settings, hoping it was just a technical glitch, but the equipment wouldn't cooperate. Then came the voice again, louder than ever before, almost as if it were coming from inside the studio. "Do you feel it now?" it growled. "It's already too late." I jumped in my seat, scanning the room. The studio was empty, save for me and the usual equipment. I couldn't figure out where the voice was coming from. It didn't seem like it was coming from the phone, not this time. It was as if the very air in the room had become saturated with that chilling voice. Panic began to rise in my chest. This couldn't be happening. I checked the phone lines. No one was on the other end. The equipment was still malfunctioning, buzzing and crackling in strange patterns. I had to get control of the situation, but something inside me told me that there was no controlling this. I had barely gotten a grip on my racing thoughts when the studio lights went out completely. The silence that followed was suffocating. Like a vacuum had suddenly sucked all the air from the room. For a long moment, I sat in the dark, not daring to make a sound. And then, the voice spoke again. "Don't you recognize me?" it asked, now strangely calm, as though it had been waiting for me to understand. "I was once like you, a host, just like you, but I never left." I froze, my mind racing. It was then that I remembered the old radio host who had worked at the station before me. The one who had mysteriously disappeared. The one everyone whispered about, but no one spoke of aloud. I could feel the blood drain from my face as I slowly pieced the puzzle together. His name had been Arthur Gray, a beloved late-night host who had vanished one night, leaving no trace. They said he'd gone mad, that something had broken inside him. But now, sitting alone in the dark studio, I knew the truth. Arthur Gray wasn't gone. He had never left. His voice, his presence had lingered in the airwaves, waiting for the next host to come along, waiting for someone to take his place. I ran to the door, desperate to escape, but it wouldn't budge. The lock was jammed, as if something was holding it in place. And as I struggled, the lights flickered back on, revealing the studio in its full, dreadful glory. The radio receiver began to crackle, and the voice came once more, no longer distorted but clear, as if it were speaking directly into my ear. "I am the one who haunts these airwaves now," Arthur's voice said, smooth and cold. "And you are the next." The walls seemed to close in on me as the room grew colder. My breath came in short gasps as I felt an icy presence surround me. There was no escaping it. The curse of the station had passed to me, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down on my chest. The phone rang one last time. I didn't want to pick it up, but I couldn't stop myself. "This is your final warning," the voice whispered. "You'll be trapped here, just like I was." I dropped the phone, but it didn't matter. The voice wasn't in the phone anymore. It was in the studio. It was in the air I breathed, in the walls that surrounded me. I had become the new host, just as Arthur Gray had once been, and like him, I would never leave. It started with a feeling that crawled under my skin like something cold, something unnatural. I wasn't sure if it was just my imagination or if something sinister was truly happening, but after that night, I couldn't shake the unease. I work late most nights in a high-rise office building in the heart of the city. The hours are long, but the pay is good, and I often find myself in the office when most others are home with their families. There's something about the stillness of the building at night that I actually found comforting at first. The hum of the HVAC system, the soft click of keyboards in the distance, it was all peaceful, like a world in suspension. That was, until the elevator started acting strange. The building was tall, a glass and steel monstrosity that stretched far above the city's skyline. The lobby was bright and immaculate, but as you ascended higher, the floor seemed to grow colder, quieter. My office was on the 18th floor, and that's where I'd usually leave for the night, heading down to the elevator to make my way to the parking garage. It was a routine, something that had never once failed me. But on one particular night, everything changed. The elevator ride down was the same as always. The familiar ding rang in my ears as the doors slid open. I stepped inside, pressed the button for the ground floor, and waited. But as the doors closed and the elevator began its descent, something felt off. The air inside the elevator grew heavy, thick with a palpable tension. My breath felt shallow, almost as if something was pressing down on me. And then, it happened. The elevator didn't stop at the ground floor. The doors opened again, but this time, it wasn't the lobby that awaited me. Instead, I was staring at a hallway, long, dark, and unfamiliar. The floors seemed to be covered in dust, and the flickering overhead lights made it difficult to see clearly. The air was stale, and there was an unsettling silence in the corridor, except for a faint whisper that seemed to come from the walls. I stepped out, thinking I had simply pressed the wrong button. Maybe an old floor had somehow been activated. But no, this wasn't a mistake. The floor number displayed above the elevator read 25, a floor that shouldn't have existed. Confusion washed over me. I had worked in this building for months and knew every floor like the back of my hand. There was no 25th floor. The elevator had taken me somewhere that shouldn't have been possible. I hesitated, my mind racing for an explanation. I was about to step back into the elevator when I heard it. A whisper. It was faint at first, but it grew louder as I listened. I couldn't make out the words, but there was something in the voice that sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't a human voice. It was hollow, like something trapped in the walls, begging for release. I rushed back to the elevator, slamming the button for the ground floor, but the doors remained closed. The elevator didn't respond. Instead, it hummed, almost like a growl from the bowels of the building. "Okay," I muttered under my breath, trying to keep calm. "I'll just wait for the next ride." I stood there, feeling foolish, when suddenly the door opened again. The hallway outside was empty, just like the first time, but there was something different now. The air felt heavier, colder, and the whispers had stopped. It was too quiet, unnaturally so. With a deep breath, I stepped out once more. The floor number on the elevator's display was now 10. Confusion swirled inside me. Why was it showing these nonsensical floor numbers? I thought about calling someone for help, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That something, someone, was waiting. I turned to walk down the hallway, my feet echoing in the emptiness. As I moved further into the building, I couldn't help but notice how the architecture felt. Off. The walls, the floors, they looked like they hadn't been touched in decades, as if this entire section of the building had been abandoned long ago. Suddenly, I heard it again, the whispering, this time louder and clearer. I stopped, heart pounding, and realized the whispers weren't coming from the walls. They were coming from behind me. I spun around, expecting to see someone there, maybe a janitor or a security guard, but no one was in sight, just emptiness. I had no idea what was going on, but I was certain of one thing. I wasn't alone. My heart raced and my breath quickened as I turned back toward the elevator, but just before I could reach it, the lights flickered. In that brief moment of darkness, I heard the unmistakable sound of a heavy footstep behind me. I froze. Slowly, I turned. There, in the darkened hallway, I saw a figure, a man. He was standing there, smiling, his features twisted into a grotesque grin. But his eyes were black, hollow, empty. I took a step back, my heart thudding in my chest. The man didn't move. He just stood there, his hollow gaze fixed on me, as if he was waiting for me to make the next move. I turned and ran. I stumbled toward the elevator, pressing the button frantically, praying it would open. When the doors finally slid open, I didn't hesitate. I stepped inside, barely managing to keep my composure as the elevator descended. But when I looked up, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The face of the man was still there, staring at me from the reflective surface of the elevator wall. He wasn't behind me anymore. He was inside the elevator, his hollow eyes locked on mine. The doors slammed shut, and I let out a cry of desperation as the elevator moved again. I don't remember much after that. I must have passed out because the next thing I knew, I was standing in the lobby, the building's front doors open, and the city lights pouring in. The elevator had dropped me off where it was supposed to, but everything felt different. My legs were weak, and I had this overwhelming feeling that something was still watching me. The whispers. They were still there, lingering in the walls of the building, waiting for the next person to step into the elevator. The building was built on the site of an old asylum, an asylum that had been abandoned decades ago. The stories said that the patients had never truly left, that they still wandered the halls, trapped between the worlds, and now it seemed that the elevator was their gateway, a way to move between the realms. The man with the hollow eyes? He was one of them, a lost soul forever searching for someone to join him. I don't work there anymore. The building is empty now, its doors locked, the elevator abandoned. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still hear the whispers. And I know that somewhere the elevator is waiting,